Well, today we are doing Irish stew, and we are in Carrickfergus, renowned for its big castle, which you can see here. And we have got some local ingredients. We've got some Irish lamb, we've got some blends of Antrim potatoes, and presumably Irish carrots. Now, to stay in the flavour of the moment, I'm going to do this entire episode with an Irish accent. So let me know how that works out. Put your comments down below. The dish is Irish stew. It's a very, very simple dish. It just basically is lamb, potatoes and carrots cooked for several hours to make them nice and tender. And that basically is it. Now, with stews, by and large, a lot of people put everything in one pot. This can be a one-pot meal where you put in the lamb, the onions, the carrots and the potatoes. Now, what I tend to find with that is the potatoes leach starch into it and the gravy becomes a bit milky and a little bit gritty, and I don't really like that. So I'm going to split it into a two-pot meal. I'm going to do my potatoes separately and I'll add them in at the end so that the potato water doesn't adulterate my nice gravy that I'm going to get to go over everything. Just my own personal preference. If you want to do it in one pot, put everything in one pot. I'm putting it in two pots, but it doesn't matter what it is. I've also got these little chantenay carrots, which be very, very nice, and I'm going to do these two different ways. Some of them I'm going to put into the dish, and some of them I'm going to do separately in the oven, and they're going to be done with olive oil and basil and a little drizzle of honey over the top to give them a nice glaze. I just give a little something extra. And so that's all the ingredients. We've got potato, we've got thyme, we've got parsley, carrots, onion and a bit of lamb. Now, given the current bug that's going around and the current situation, normally you would use neck of lamb and you'd trim it and get rid of all the fat. All I could get was this little bit of leg of lamb. So needs must when the devil drives. The first thing I'm going to do is cut this up into chunks and remove any gristly bits and things like that. So I've got my little Stay Sharp knife, which self-sharpens every time I use it using the little sharpener on the sheath. Because being on a boat, you don't want to reach into a cupboard and take out a razor sharp knife. So that sharpens every time I do it, and it's got a nice sharp blade on it. But I'm going to use this for boning, so let's get started. Okay, so I've got my meat out of the packaging, and you can see here's the bone running through. So what I'm going to do is separate the meat along this. There we go. And then it's just a case of working the knife in. And you can see with this nice fine tipped knife, it does a very good job of working along the bone. There we go. And that has a bit of meat on it, which I can extract later. But for now, it's just a case of dividing this up and removing any spare bits of bone that I feel, any bits of gristle, fine bits of the meat where it divides naturally, and just peel them apart. Look at that. So all I'm going to do now is use this to trim off some of the bits. You can see where this wants to divide. It quite easily just comes away. And you can just take out, like there's a bit of gristle there, so I'll just cut along the gristle. And that exposes it, and I can get rid of it. That's the tough gristle off. It's a little bit just there. Just trim that edge. And we're just going to carry on like this. What I've done is I have cut the onion, as you can see, into quite large chunks. And the reason, and also I've cut the lamb into quite large chunks too. The reason I've done this is because they're going to be slow cooked for 2 or 3 hours, and if you cut them into small chunks, they just dissolve and disappear. That's no good, man, they're based. I've got some chantenay carrots, which I have put some in my cooking pot, as you can see, and I put them in with the potatoes. And I've got some other ones that I'm going to put in with the lamb. These ones I will pick out later once they're cooked through a bit, and I'll put them in the oven and I will coat them in olive oil, and then I'll glaze them with some honey, and it brings up the sweetness of the carrot and makes it taste very, very yummy. There's usually fights over my carrots when they're done that way. These carrots are just going in. I have not peeled the chantenay carrots because it's a waste of effort. They don't taste any different if you peel them, so why put all that effort into peeling them? They're just going in as they are. And you notice my pile of carrots is about the same size as my pile of onions, which is fairly similar in size to my pile of meat. So You know, I'll give you all the weights of these things later and what they are, but that's just my little rule of thumb for doing it. So in goes some oil. And if you're curious as to how much oil it is, it was about that much. So start off, in go the onions. About a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of pepper. I've chopped my stock cube up just to make it easier to dissolve into the oils and things. Yeah, just going to add a little bit of water to sweat the onions. The onions are starting to get a little bit transparent, so it's time for the meat to go in. I tend to find onions lose their bitterness when they go transparent, so that's the time I like to add my other ingredients. Dessert spoon of split red lentils, and another one. In go my carrots. So I'm now adding enough water to cover the meat. And I'm also adding my water to my potatoes and carrots. So I'm just going to put a few sprigs of thyme into the dish as well. I don't bother cutting them or chopping them, there's no point. The leaves will come off in the cook. So let's put a few sprigs of that in and give it a stir. I need a little bit more water than I've got, so I'm just going to add some. And then all of this, once it starts to boil, this is going to be left alone for 2 or 3 hours. So, because we're on board a boat, we use our slow cooker for this. You can use a slow cooker if you're at home. Yours will probably plug into the mains and just sizzle away. We have a vacuum jacket that our pots go into. This is Mr. D, our thermal cooker, and this is Ellie, our channel mascot. Right, so the idea is that we... whoa! Our vegetable pot goes into our stew pot. Lid goes on top. And we open this in 2 or 3 hours time. So I've taken the potatoes and the pot out of Mr. D. I'm just giving this a little warmer because I'm about to thicken it with some corn flour. Like I said, I've taken them out and I have sprinkled them with some basil flavoured olive oil. And I'm now putting them in the oven to get well and truly sizzled to death. Before I serve them up, I will give them a slight drizzle with some honey. Just a drizzle, not a soaking. I want to enhance the sweetness of the carrot, not drown it out in bee spit. I've got my corn flour, cornstarch if you prefer, water mix, and I am going to stir it into this, which is just beginning to simmer. So this will thicken the sauce. You can see that it's just starting to simmer in there. A little bit in, give it a stir. If I accidentally over thicken it, I can always add a bit of water to thin it back down again. It's a very pale gravy. That's because there are no tomatoes in it.
Well, there you have it.
Irish stew.
Irish stew. And we're in Ireland.
Irish stew in the name of the law. Oh, one little point, by the way. The recipe says to cut your carrots into coins, into discs. I've not done that for a very good reason. If I'm cutting a carrot, I won't cut it into a disc. I will usually cut it lengthwise into what people often call batons. Obviously with Chantilly carrots, they're a bit pointy. But for some reason, and I know not why, this tastes better than that. I've never got to the bottom of the mystery as to why it should be either from the same carrot, for heaven's sake. But that will taste better than this. I have no idea why. But it's my own little personal legend and mystery and belief. Carrots are going in whole, as they are. If they didn't go in whole, they'd go in battens. I will never have this darkening the door of my boat.